Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another podcast. My guest today is Shonagh. Shonagh is a shamanic therapist, a teacher, an author, and a poet. She's contributed many times to the Psychedelic Salon podcast, so if you listen to that one with Lorenzo, you may recognize her from there. And she's also been a very strong woman's voice when it comes to the use of magic mushrooms, and that's basically what we're talking about here today. We talk about many things sort of intertwined with the discussion of psilocybin, but specifically I wanted to ask Shonagh about Irish and Celtic mythology and history when in how it relates to the use of mushrooms, because that's something I have a personal interest in, and I know that Shonagh had done a bunch of research in that regard. So we talk a bit about that and paganism and things of that nature, but we also get into lots of cool stuff. Shonagh talks about spell casting and curses, and that's something that was fascinating, and she gives a really good example of what she means by that, because a lot of people are going to hear that and think, oh, Harry Potter with a magic wand or something, and that's not exactly what we talk about. Shonagh gives an example of the media and entertainment having a sort of spell over all of us, that there's so many movies and things out there for us to be distracted by, that it's kind of like, hey everybody, don't pay attention to that stuff going on over there. Just put your feet up and relax and check out these movies and watch your favorite sports team and this kind of thing. And that we're kind of, in a way, subdued by all of this entertainment, and how that can be thought of as sort of having a spell over people. It's very interesting. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I do want to say that I love talking to Shonagh. Yeah, she really resonated with me personally. Like a lot of the things she was saying, I think I'm someone who, I like to believe. I do believe. I don't know exactly what I believe in, but I believe in something else. And so talking to someone like Shonagh, who also is willing to believe, it's inspiring for me. So I really enjoyed this. Thanks, Shonagh, for speaking with me, and thanks to you for listening. Check it out. This is me with Shonagh.
Well, okay, there are a couple of really good. Well, there's Peter Lamborn Wilson wrote a book called Plowing the Clouds, The Search for Irish Soma. And
Oh yeah.
he's amazing. He is quite the scholar. And so he did a tremendous amount of research comparing the stories of Soma from the Vedas to the stories, the mythologies and the stories of the Celts, and pointing out a lot of very interesting similarities, as there are similarities in the some of the Norse stories as well. And so none of this stuff, of course, nothing was written down really until the Christian scribes, I think, showed up. And what was written was all metaphor. It just makes me think of the Bible, where everyone's either taking it literally or they're screaming about poo-pooing the Bible, and like no one gets that. First of all, it was never meant to be taken literally. It's only taken literally by the uninitiated, by those who have not been initiated into the deeper meaning, the metaphor, the allegory, whatever. And so these old mythologies, I think, are no different. And so I am still, this poetry book that I sent you, that's really stirred my curiosity to delve even deeper here, because it makes perfect sense that when we're dealing with the mysteries, if you will, and their thinking was so vastly different back then, but it's not going to be sort of written verbatim. Yes, we took the mushroom and then we mixed it with this and we put it in the mead and we did this and whatnot, right? It's all told as a story. And then those who are in the know precisely what they are speaking to. Plus, they were master storytellers. All those people were, back then, many of them. And so, you would create this vast tale about this experience, and there would be just these striking similarities. So, and also, I have to say, just from my own mushroom use, and I'm no expert. I don't know anyone who is, and I hope there aren't any out there. I mean, this is a profound mystery, right? But one thing I do know is this is an ancient teacher mushroom, as are these other psychoactive plants.
Yeah, but
Okay.
Yeah, it seems too obvious. Like, as someone personally too who's used mushrooms myself and just found that they have provided me little teachings and little things. And it wasn't that I went in with any real knowledge about how to use them or anything. They just were so obviously geared toward helping me in that way, in these various ways. It seems pretty obvious that people in the past would have used these things too. It's not that it's too easy, because there are dangers too, and people can get lost in this stuff as well. And there's the danger of delusion that I talk about sometimes and things.
Sure.
But at the same time, my friends and I all took these things when we were like 14 for the first time, and we navigated it just fine, really. And so if, a group of 14-year-olds can do it, I'm sure people in the past would also have tried these things and gotten things out of them as well.
Well, yes, of course. And also, these people were gathering, they were hunters and gatherers, and they understood the landscape pretty darn well. And many of them were, for all intents and purposes, master pharmacologists. And folk medicine itself comes from the folk who understood all the herbs. So they knew, of course, which herbs had medicinal properties, what those medicinal properties would be. They knew which ones would poison. And you bet your bottom dollar they knew which ones would bring you into an intoxicating state.
If you put yourself into that lifestyle that they must have lived, they're going to have a much stronger relationship with just the nature around them than we do today. I mean, we're really disconnected from that, especially in city life,
Oh, we are a shadow of what we used to be. Even in the shamanic, we are a shadow of what we used to be. I know that because we have essentially been domesticated. They have herded us into these cities, and we have become domesticated. And so I see the mushroom as kind of one of the last territories of the wild. Like, it's like, keep your mind wild.
It's something to explore still. Yeah, like something new, and like a connection to that as well. Yeah.
Yes. And I in a conversation with those mushroom beings, felt it say, I am that which will not be legitimized. I am that which will not be civilized.
Right.
Of course not. Right.
Yeah. And so that's something I do also want to talk to you about. Maybe I can tie it in, but something you mention a lot is your interaction with beings, with other entities of some kind in these experiences you have. And maybe, that kind of talk makes people feel a little bit uneasy, or they go,
Sure.
Oh man, like you're talking about.
Oh yeah.
But I thought maybe I could start by sharing an experience I had. Basically, the one experience that I've ever had where I did feel I encountered another type of being of some kind. So maybe, I just thought I'd be take the first step and put it out there. I've talked about it before on the podcast, and it wasn't with mushrooms. I've done mushrooms quite a bit, and I at times felt, faintly that maybe there was some other energy or thing close to me. But this was with ayahuasca, where it was very clear that there were some beings close to me. So they call them, where I was in Peru, they call them Dr. Citos, which means the little doctors is how they refer to them.
Oh, really?
And maybe you've
Sounds
heard
like
of them.
elves to me. Go on.
Yeah. So there were, and it was, I took ayahuasca 4 times while I was there during this 1 week. And it was the 3rd time where I had a stronger experience. And there were 3 little, very small white beings of some kind. And they all looked exactly the same. They were very slender. I couldn't really see any facial features, but short, very bright white, slender things that seemed to be doing something to my head. I felt a very direct buzzing and some kind of interaction with my head. It lasted, only maybe 10 seconds and they were gone. But in those 10 seconds, it was quite clear. I felt their presence, and they weren't exactly like overly friendly, but they made it clear they were not there for any negative. I didn't have to fear them, but they weren't like joking or anything. They were just kind of doing something. And what was interesting about that was not just that I had that experience, but that 2 other people at the retreat also described the exact same beings to me, that they had also encountered them. So that was really interesting to me, because then it really, it helped confirm that it wasn't just some weird delusion or something, that other people described them exactly the same type of experience as well. So I don't really know what to call those things, really. That was the only time I've ever encountered them. They haven't come back to visit me since. I haven't seen them, but I would like to just get your take on that kind of experience and what that means to you.
Well, first of all, the reason why, of course, you have no touchstone on those beings is because for all of us, we've lost our connection to our ancestors. We've lost our connection to our heritage, our culture, our mythology, our creator gods and goddesses. We've lost all of that. So we're in a very material and I would say sterile mindset.
Right.
It's totally sterile. It's wiped all of that off the table, and including, conventional psychiatry. We'll just say, I mean, I'm sure they'd think I was a full-on, loop-de-loop, and let's get her medicated quick.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And maybe get her into one of our institutions and just dope her up.
Right.
And so that's their answer. And I look to the ancients for my wisdom now, and especially when I first began exploring the shamanic, and it happened very organically for me because it happened on a retreat with a teacher, Brew Joy, who's since passed. But we were for 10 days in Arizona out in the desert, and we had 3 days of fasting and silence, and I went out there. I could not wait. And I didn't know anything about the shamanic, but I wanted to make a circle. And then I put what I called an X in it, not even realizing, well, Shonagh, that's actually, cross 4 directions. And I hung out in that thing for 3 days. I'd go in at night, but I hang out for 3 days. But before I went in, I felt like it came to me like, we got to wake this thing up. And so I tapped the ground and called up energy from the earth. And then I called down energy from the sky, and I called energy from any spirits in the vicinity and the nature spirits. And I'm telling you, just completely organic, if you will. And I essentially woke this circle up. And then when I would hang out in that circle, I was having visions, and my Kundalini opened, and there was no taking any plants. This was long before that. That was probably 6 years before I began working with the mushroom.
You tried fasting.
Yes, fasting, and but it was only for 3 days. It wasn't like I was doing, a 40-day fast or anything like that. But in any case, but I was in an altered state. And so I think also, you have a proclivity for this kind of thing or you don't. And so I clearly did. And also something that I had a proclivity for is when I would work on people doing Reiki energetic work, if they had lost a loved one, that person would come into me. And I would impart a message. And there was one time where it was particularly dramatic. And the way I spoke to her, and her father had committed suicide, and the way it came through me was pretty gruff. Like I would never necessarily talk to someone like that, a message from their father. But I just let it flow. I wasn't channeling him. I just said, look, this is what he's saying. And I see him here and he's doing, and she just said, my God, that is exactly how he talks. That's exactly what he would say. And she went home and told her mom, hey, dad came and he said this and this. Okay. So there's a proclivity already there to be able to communicate with disembodied intelligences. I mean, I didn't go out and market myself as such. It was just something that would happen. Now, this is not new. This is old. And we have always kept in touch with our ancestors, honored them in some way. And there were certain people in the communities who had the ability to communicate with them. The same with nature intelligences. And so these are in every mythology. Every mythology has their groups of different nature intelligences. These are not, and by the way, okay, so the Celts, the Irish, the Scots have what we call the fairies, but they're not the Victorian gossamer winged little beings. These are ancient. Oh, they're ancient intelligences, ancient race of beings. And so I wrote about that a bit in my book that you read, and which I'll talk about in a bit. But in any case, And in the Scandinavian countries, they had the elves, or Alfar, they were known, which is a Norse word, or the wights, Wights, and that was understood in Anglo-Saxon by Anglo-Saxon people as well. So, and then the Native American people here in North America also recognized that, yes, of course, there are certain nature, spirit, everything was sentient. In other words, everything is an intelligence. And then certainly if you ingest some kind of plant or fungi that is going to take you out of this mind state and into a very different mind state where you are far more sensitive to the energies around you, then there is a chance. It doesn't happen for everyone, as you know, right? Because everyone has a different experience. This is not public school. These are mushrooms, very wild, but certain people, of course, will be able to connect in a way to these intelligences. And these intelligences were sought by people in the past, of course, for their knowledge, for their wisdom. And certainly among women, I speak of this often, that we have the oracles at Delphi, and they would inhale the ethylene gases that emitted from a crevasse in the cave area from below the ground. And that would put them in a high trance state, and they would connect to the deity of the temple, and they would prophesy. They prophesy. And interestingly, they would prophesy in poetic, poetically. And poetry was thought of as the language of the gods, or whoever, you were these divine beings you were speaking for. And also in the Norse tradition, we have the Volva, Volva, and those women also would go into very high trance states. And they were connecting with other realms and the intelligences of those realms. And these women were very highly respected.
So you're at a point with, because of some experiences you've had personally and things, you're just at a point where even if you can't explain all of it, you believe that there is these other realms and these other conscious beings that you can communicate with in certain ways.
I'm past belief. I know.
Yeah, you're pretty confident about it.
It's not even confidence. If you either know or you don't know, right? And I know. I mean, I've had so many extraordinary synchronistic experiences. And, I also, Carl, first of all, I look at the culture we're in now, which to me is just an aberration. I mean, I really do think we are in a dystopia. It is really, it's appalling. And we have, mankind has fallen. There's no question. We have fallen far away from the connection we once had to nature, to the realms to the seen and the worlds of the unseen. And by the way, I look at it this way, or I'll explain to people this way. We're in duality. You can't have life without duality, right? Yeah, positive, negative charge, day, night, sun, moon, right? And that is a dance. It's a beautiful dance. There's, of course, we have the non-dualistic place, and that is a realm, but it's not here where we're living. And so everything must have its equal and opposite. Therefore, if we have the world of the seen, of course, stands to reason, we must have the world of the unseen.
Right. And so what you mentioned before was that it seems like certain people, for whatever reason, or just have a more of a tendency or more of an ability of some kind to communicate in some way, or just to reach these realms, or to see these spirits or whatever they are. But it doesn't seem like everyone can get to the same place and see the same things. Or
I think it's no different than someone being really, really good at math, or someone being really, really good at a sport.
Right.
And, I could try my hand at that and maybe do okay. But, so our wiring is so different. All of us, we are so unique. And so, some of us have a proclivity for one thing and others have a proclivity for another.
Right. Yeah, like in that way, if you ask someone, well, why are you so good at math? It's not like they can tell you why. They just, that's just how my brain works. I can see the numbers, and it just, I can see that. being the case. And you know what's funny? And I was going to mention this, and I have no idea if this like is anything to consider at all. But myself and the two other people who did see these same type of entities, all were of Irish and Scottish descent. I don't know if that means anything.
It does.
The one guy was actually from Ireland. Like, he had come from Ireland. He was born and raised full Irish. And then the other girl who was there, I don't know exactly her descent, but she definitely had the Irish-Scottish appearance, and her last name started with Mick, M-C. So from somewhere over there. And I'm also, mainly Irish and Norwegian descent. And I just thought that was funny. I really don't know what that means.
I think that is a good observation, and it's to be considered. The CIA has been conducting experiments with sort of paranormal for decades and decades, probably since, I don't know, the 40s or 50s or something. And one of the things they have done is, they use people who are very good at remote viewing, that kind of thing. And I happen to know a woman who had her own law firm, by the way, who has worked with teachers who are ex-CIA to help her with this. In any case, the people that they most like to recruit for these kind of studies are Native American and also the Irish.
Is that right?
Yes. Yes. Because there is a similar proclivity there to be able to access these states and connect in that way. And I read that somewhere, and this woman I spoke to concurred. And not that she knew that exactly, but she said, that would make perfect sense, because, a lot of these people are exactly, that descent.
It's funny. It's one of those things to say where it just makes me feel like, oh yeah, I'm part of the cool group or whatever. I don't know. I don't really,
I don't see it as that. I just see it as, again, you either have this proclivity or you don't. And for some of us, this is in our bloodlines. And again, this is a whole mystery that they don't teach you in public school. But, the bloodline's very, very important. And I know that there are, a small number of families on this planet who know full well how important those bloodlines are to keep them, a certain purity and whatnot. Because it's understood that then it's that much easier to trace back to your original creator gods, easier to trace back to your ancestry and kind of maintain whatever proclivities would be in that bloodline, shall we say. And so, don't you think it's interesting too that both Native American people and Irish don't do well with the alcohol? Do they? They really, funny. When they start drinking, boy, it's a mess.
That's funny.
The Irish are known for their drink, their love of drink, and, just the Native Americans, they just cannot, for the most part, handle it. Yeah. And so I think, in other words, there's so much more than meets the eye. There's so much going on beneath the surface. And we are given a very superficial view. And so we have to go far deeper, and we have to look beyond what we are being told and seek that out. But yes, the Celts have a proclivity for that. And for myself, it has been just very, just kind of very fluid. And I was just in Scotland. Well, I should say, I've had these extraordinary openings with the mushroom. 5 years ago, I just went out to the rainforest in July, and a friend of mine inducted me. And it was 5 dried grams a la Terence McKenna lying down in the darkness. But we were in a moss forest. It was exquisite. And the earth spoke to me. I had this incredible healing. And I got home, and it was all I could think of. And also, by the way, when I was on that medicine journey, I saw my friend's face as Pan, who is the Lord of the forest. Now, the Celts have a version of Pan known as Cernunnos. He is the horned god. And when I got home, a couple of weeks later, I began a year-long training that I was leading. I had 10 women come. And on a Friday night, we did a fire ceremony that I led. And one of the women asked if she could photograph. I said, sure. And so she did. And then that night, she sent me the photos. She sent me a few of the fire. I picked a random one of the fire and a few of the others. shot them off to my friend. And he writes back, he goes, hey, I dig the face in the fire. I'm like, face in the fire? What are you talking about? And I look back, and in the fire is a perfect profile of Pan, right down to a little horn at the top, the nose, the mouth, the lips, the chin, the goatee, an eye right where an eye should be. I mean, I showed it to everybody in the group the next day, and it was astonishing. I'll send you that picture. And so I had to go back the following month, and it ended up being every month, almost every month, outside in the forest doing that medicine. And I apprenticed myself to the mushroom that year.
I see.
And then it's just been cumulative. And over that year, that's when these sort of intelligences started coming in, and then they would speak through me. Lots of birds. Interesting that, the eagle and whatnot are associated with Soma, and is spoken of quite a bit in that mythology. In any case, so yeah. And then a couple years after that, poetry started coming in. And so this is that poetic intoxication is associated also with these mind states that these plants and fungi will take you to.
Yeah. Well, that's something, I mean, you brought up Terence, and that's something Terence McKenna would talk about quite a bit, was just language. He had lots of great quotes and discussions on language itself, but also just, I mean, he would say, like, our world is made up of language. We live in language. We understand everything through language. There's no meaning without language, all this. But yeah, in these mushroom states, often I feel like things do come in metaphors and things. Like you're guided through this, through these teachings that aren't necessarily super direct. It's not always like some being just comes to you and says, okay, this you have to change this, you got to do this. It's often you have to take meaning from whatever visions are coming that have meaning sort of hidden in ways, or you have to extract it or understand it in different ways. And
that ties in with the mythology from way back when, that it's highly, highly metaphorical. You've got to really read into what they're really saying.
So it's that poetic mindset of speaking in those ways and those
prose. Yeah, and it is all metaphor. And I see life as metaphor as well, a lot.
Right. I tend to look at the world a lot in that way as well. And it's something I don't always share, or I don't always talk about, but definitely if I go to the core of my beliefs and the beliefs that dictate my behaviors, a lot of them are metaphorical, or, I look at my past actions and try to take metaphor from them, or look at them as some kind of mirror of something greater or something deeper, or that kind of thing.
Good.
And it's a way I do view the world that way quite a bit, but I don't always share that. I don't always talk about that I look at it that way, because it's not really it's not a common practice. It's not something that's brought up a lot in day-to-day life, or it's not how we live.
Not anymore.
No.
But it used to be.
Yeah.
It used to be. So that practice that you have would have been commonplace at one point. And so in that way, you are still carrying something very old that is intrinsic to our culture, the Celtic culture. Yeah.
So what is your heritage then? It sounds like you're
Scottish,
mostly.
Irish, okay. Gaul. There's French is Gaul.
Oh, Gaul. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because I just went to Scotland for the first time in September.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've still never been over there. I really want to go.
Wait till you get there.
Yeah.
Just wait. And you have to go to the ancient stone circles. You have to go.
Right.
Those are on geomagnetic hotspots where the energy is very, very, very high. A lot of magnetic energy.
Is that right?
And then those stones were placed in a very specific geometrics. So the geometry as well affects the energy there. And ritual was done there, and it was necessary to purify, because it was thought that also what you think, if you're doing this from a place of intention, you're going to send that outward more so than anywhere else, because the magnetics are so high already. And so I went there with Freddie Silva, who is one of the world's leading researchers on crop circles and also sacred sites. And he's like a walking encyclopedia.
Oh, that would be great to have someone like that with you. Yeah.
He's fantastic. It was Freddie and just 6 of us. And we went to the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. And for me, it was a pilgrimage. I had to really save my shekels and, get myself over there. And I know as a result of doing the medicine and because I know it changes your brain, it changes you in some way, truly.
Yeah. It
Subtly.
seems like, yeah.
But it changes you, no question. And so those circles opened up to me. And I had poetry just flowing through me while I was there. And then when I came home, it was like they came back with me.
Right.
And more, we just call it the muse. The muse
the inspiration
was very present. And thus then this book was birthed soon after.
So that came, I see. So you got really inspired from that time in Scotland.
Yeah, well, also, okay, so I'd had these poems coming for the past probably 2 or 3 years as a result of, I know it comes from doing the mushroom. I never did poetry before.
Right.
And so then this past August, which was a full moon in Aquarius, and I did the medicine with a friend, and she went into her piece deeply, and they speak with me now, or speak to me poetically. And so I just have a little digital recorder, and I just for 2 hours basically whispered into the recorder all of these poetic messages. And so those I translated into or transcribed into different poems. And so now I have this new book coming out in January called Poetic Whispers from the Green Realms. It'll be available on my website. And I could read one of the poems if you want. What I say in the book that is very interesting in the introduction is how poetry is it comes from the shamans, or the shamans were known to speak poetically, whether they were oracles at Delphi or seeresses. And in the Mazatec tradition, it's understood that the shaman is the voice of the mushroom.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you said that you didn't feel like you were very, like, before your use of mushrooms, you weren't very poetically inclined, and it was after that you delved into that. I haven't really thought about that too much, but it may be true for me as well. I was never very into, not until later, I started getting into writing and things. And then I actually, I studied creative writing in school. So I have a degree in creative writing because I got very into that. At the time I was in college, I switched majors to writing because I was just so into it at the time. And I hadn't really read poetry. I read a lot of poetry then, but I hadn't really since. So it was fun to read your the book that you sent me. I'm glad that you did. I enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed the bits you had at the beginning for sure, because it was very Celtic inspired and talked about all those, from fairies to elves and all of these things that had been mentioned. And what else too, I was going to mention earlier that you said that in the book that maybe there were all these traditions, but they weren't exactly written down. And it wasn't until the Christians had come and then co-opted and sort of filtered all of these things through their vision. And I think you talked about them seeing some of these things as fallen angels instead of the other, what they had named them as elves or fairies or whichever.
Yeah. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. I mean, we really actually feel, in a way, we're indebted to those early Christian scribes.
Because right. At least they wrote them down at all, yeah.
Yeah, they wrote them down. And as the centuries went on, there were, of course, some priests or monks who were very sympathetic, shall we say, to the fairy faith in Ireland. But of course, initially, they set out to, no more worshiping trees, no worshiping wells or stones or any of that. No, we're going to wipe out all those pagan practices. It took them a long time to do so. In fact, they eventually had to assimilate many of those pagan gods and goddesses and call them saints. And so the best example of that is, of course, Saint Bridget, who was an Irish mother goddess. And before her was Dana, who was the mother of the Tuatha De Danann, who are thought to be the fairy race, or they're known as the Sidhe, Sidhe. And so, yeah.
So what's your interpretation then of, say, looking at just sort of the pagan or the druids or whatever, the Celtic mythology and things? I mean, if they talk about fairies, do you kind of just interpret that now because of your experiences? Like, oh, they say they were using psilocybin, and what they saw were these same things, and they just had these words to describe them. Or do you think it was something totally different that isn't, like, say I saw these white beings, would those be the same fairy beings that they might have been talking about, or?
They may well be. The way I look at this also is, when we're ingesting a plant or a fungi like that, that plant or that fungus, that mushroom is ancient. It's ancient. And so you're ingesting that. You're not going to have that same experience just from umming and schlumming and getting yourself in a meditation.
Yeah, I've come to that conclusion too. Because early on, looking into psychedelics, you'd hear that a lot. Like, oh yeah, you could use mushrooms, but you could just do yoga. And it's like, no, actually, no, they're different. It's not going to be the same.
No, of course not. And you've invited in another intelligence, an ancient master intelligence that we really don't know. I mean, our science likes to take these plants and then they just, narrow it down to whatever the active component is. They separate that entirely, and then they mix some of their synthetic stuff, and then they call it something else. They market that, and that's what we get. But they've lost all of those interrelating active.
Yeah, I had a conversation about that recently with someone. I haven't put that podcast out yet, but it'll be coming out soon. And we just spoke about that and how we like to extract everything. Like, we were talking about marijuana and how people extract THC, but then we're learning now that there's all these other things. CBD is really big. That's a big. It helps with physical inflammation and all these things. And it's just, like that. Just a simple example, like I gave before too, is that we take all the sugar out of fruit. And then we just eat all this sugar, and then we find out, and we go, oh, maybe fiber is important, and the other vitamins that are in there, and there's a lot, to these natural things that contain this stuff.
Nature doesn't make mistakes. So what we have here is, since the Industrial Revolution, it's this just gradual seducing us away, away, away from our connection to nature. And all of nature is a kind of technology that man will never be able to trump. There's no way, never come close. Every time they try to, they make a mess. Look at all the genetically modified organisms, and bees go over to those fields, and then they take that
There's
nectar
all these
and they
consequences because it is so complicated. Yeah, obviously, like, you're a beekeeper, so you would know about how complicated all these relationships in nature are, like between all this stuff, bees and flowers and everything. So we can try to do this advanced technology stuff here and there, but then we realize there's consequences to all of these things that we're doing that really radiate out into all these other areas.
Oh yeah. Because essentially, what are you doing? You've broken natural law. You've broken natural law. You don't split atoms.
Well, I don't know. Because you could say that, but you could also say that, like, we're here with the ability to do this, and we are natural too, and that, our abilities are natural, and our inclination to be scientifically advanced and all this stuff is a natural process too, and there's that whole argument.
Yes, and of course the ancients understood all of that. And if you don't have wisdom, then you are a child playing with tools of the gods, and that is what we have.
Right, I see what you mean. Like, we're quite advanced in this technological way, but we're just not using that advanced technology in the right way. We're going too far and being too chaotic with what we're doing.
Well, and it is just like, I don't know, it's like mankind on steroids, mental steroids here. I mean, it's crazy. There's no forethought as to, okay, well, let's think about this, because once you invent it, you can't uninvent it. And so then it's out there, and it gets into the wrong hands, which it inevitably. Okay, first of all, look at what this culture does with the mushroom, anyway, or with anything. It gets profaned, if you will. People abuse it.
Yeah.
because they are not, we don't have a touchstone here to really, instruct us in how to use that. I mean, of course, many of us figure it out, but many don't.
Right.
Many
Yeah.
don't, and they make a mess. And that is true of everything. Everything. We must have that wisdom to say, all right, we have this technology. This is massive and could have effects that are absolutely just indescribable on this planet. So let's have some exercise, some caution, but we don't get that. No, we get,
Right.
ooh, we can make so much money off of this, or we
Yeah.
can, control the masses with this,
Yeah.
or whatever, whoever's got it and whatever their agenda is. So you have no wisdom. And that is something that I think the ancients possessed in spades compared to what we see now.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
we're being
so
led by a lot of greed and power, it seems like.
well, yes, because I think, the power structure is a criminal syndicate. It's a
Mm.
combination of different, criminal syndicates around the world.
Yeah, it's
And,
become very
yeah,
corrupt, it seems.
yeah, highly,
Yeah.
highly.
But that's all, things are I've become more and more optimistic really with as I've talked to more and more people about this because just even in the 2 years I've been doing this podcast, I feel like there's been a lot of changes and things are changing and people are getting a lot more information now and clearly something's got to give. And like you said, like it seems like we're kind of as on a cultural level we seem like we're operating in like a child mindset. Like we're very
Yeah, that's
yeah.
by design. We've been infantilized.
Mm. Oh,
We've been
yeah.
infantilized. Think about even just last century, how very steadily the population went from being pretty autonomous, pretty, like people were growing their own food, they had
Mm.
land, they knew
Yeah.
their neighbors,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
someone broke their leg, okay, couldn't get to a doctor, no problem, because, you or the guy across the street knew how to set it.
Mm.
We could, we could do so much
Right. Yeah.
on our own. And then steadily, steadily, steadily over this past century, now people are utterly dependent on their
Right.
government.
Yeah, it's true. But there is that movement now. There's that pushback against that. We're now this
Yes.
urban gardening and these
Hmm.
things are becoming more because I think people are realizing that we are becoming weak in certain areas that we just don't have control over our own food or things like this.
Yeah, no one knows how to do anything anymore. I mean, that's a big generalization, but in terms of, we used to make our own clothes. We could at least make some shoes, and like no one
Yeah.
really basically knows how to do these skills that we used to have that were just intrinsic to all communities, of course, including taking care of ourselves medically even.
Right. Yeah, things have become more specialized in these different areas where we depend on
Compartmentalized.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. No, true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but you're right. People, there is a starting to be a pushback. It's like the pendulum swings in one
Yeah.
direction, and then it has to start swinging
Yeah.
the other.
I do really believe in that. Yeah, I believe in that things will
Oh yeah.
come back around. They have to, yeah.
Oh yes. Well, I think also because more people are realizing the system doesn't really work.
Right. It's not
I mean,
sustainable. Yeah.
it's not sustainable, but also, modern medicine doesn't cure.
Yeah.
Modern psychiatry isn't doing a great job curing. They're
Yeah.
great at dishing out drugs and keeping the populace very medicated.
Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah, and that's I think yeah, like that's like if I believe in anything, it's in truth, and the truth will set us free, and that people
Mhm.
eventually, when things don't work over and over, well, now all these studies are finally proving all the benefits to all these psychedelics, that are illegal, and people, it's gonna work. It's gonna help people with post traumatic stress, and that's gonna have more and more people on board, and things will change because it actually is true. It works. It's these things help us with this connection that we're missing, and that's undeniable. People can't deny that forever. You know.
Yes,
Eh,
yes. And with a good practitioner, that makes a huge difference. I talk a lot about the modern medicine woman,
mm,
and so to work with someone on the medicine or after they've experienced the medicine, because that's really key. Because, like, okay, you had this experience, now what the hell happened?
yeah, absolutely.
Let's
Yeah.
let's look at that as if we were working with a dream. It's all, we can look at it as, metaphor. and what are the gems, and what was that saying? And often what people think maybe was saying one thing can actually say something far, far deeper.
Yeah.
That actually is something that they really need to come into awareness of so that they can shift it. And so it would take an astute practitioner working with them to help point that out. So then they can take those gems and apply that to their life. And I do a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff definitely, it's not simple. Like I've had a lot of these experiences now, and I haven't done them for a while. Yeah, I haven't used mushrooms for over a year now. I've been meaning to lately. I just haven't made it happen. But I do think like there's been lots of times where during the experience or even directly after, I feel so inspired and I feel like, oh, this is what I've been missing and this is what I can work on and I can go from here and da da da. And then you just fall back into the daily grind and the things, and it's really hard to make bigger changes and do this and live from that mindset or live from that inspiration and push yourself to go in that direction despite all the challenges that are going to be in the way, because it's never easy. It's not easy to use these things.
No, I'm so glad you said that, Carl, because I tell the people that I work with, all right, look, it's a thick spell out there, because the beings speak in terms of spells through my medicine experiences. That's their metaphor for it. It's a thick spell. And so you have to, first of all, realize that it is a spell,
right,
and start seeing it for what it is. Because don't you feel like we're being just entertained? It is incessant. It's like, why do we need that much entertainment? Sports and shows and movies, and everywhere you go, the CNN is on or whatever, which to me is just more entertainment. It's not real news necessarily.
Totally, yeah, man. Yeah, I was definitely going to ask you about that. I'm glad you brought that up. Just because you mentioned that before, just the idea of spells, but you talk about them in this other way that like the media is kind of involved in this overall spell. And a great quote of, I think it's Frank Zappa, who said that like politics are just the entertainment of the military industrial complex or something like that.
Thank you. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah.
He's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes wonder, anyway, if the military's, well, they're definitely running a big part of this show. That's for sure.
Well,
I mean, I get vets who I talk to every so often who tell me some very interesting stories around sort of what's going on with all of that.
Yeah. Well, that's all scary for sure. And that's all, it's all things are being controlled. People do have there are people out there with a lot of power that are affecting a lot of this. And I always wonder how much of it is intentional and how much is just ignorance and just greed and just sort of naivety or whatever.
I would recommend reading a PDF you can read online called Silent Weapons for Secret Wars, and then we'll have another conversation.
Yeah. Is that about the media, like you were just mentioning?
Oh, no, not the media, but just the military. Well, sort of the whole sort of undermining of society, the undermining of morals. Because when you undermine the moral fabric of a society, you've destroyed that society, right? Because now all hell breaks loose. And where are the threads that keep that society together? And and we stand on our ethics, and when that goes, it becomes chaos. And gosh, I'm trying to think of what I wanting to say something when we were talking earlier about spells. Oh, well, okay. So first of all, don't watch TV. Don't watch. That's my advice to everybody. They look at the words. If we're going to talk about playing with words, a television. You're telling a vision. First of all, Hollywood. Holly was the wood used to make the sorcerer's wand.
That's
okay.
Hilarious.
True. And then they tell us to our face, what do you want to watch on television? A program. To be programmed. And then lo and behold, we know that within the first 15 seconds of watching television, you go into a mild trance state, which makes you very suggestible.
Right.
And now all of these programs have storylines and just nothing in there by accident. Like I can spot it a mile away, just this whole sort of whatever they're sort of pushing to influence the populace. That will be sort of the theme, and it kind of runs through everything. And so, I just can see, especially really thanks to the mushroom. I mean, it has it can make you delusional. Some people, they think they're Jesus or whatever their deal is, right? And then for others, it can really click things on here.
Mm-hmm.
And you start really seeing like Neo in the Matrix in that moment when all of a sudden the lights go on and he gets it and he says no. And then after that, those bullets can't.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
it just shows, it gives you another perspective, and like facilitates some questioning of the world around you.
Some necessary questioning. And that's the other thing. We are not in these schools that we go to. We're not trained to question. We're trained to answer questions, and we're trained to swallow and memorize a bunch of basically useless information,
to sit still in a desk for a very long time, put your physical pain and things aside, and just sit and listen and be a good child.
Right. And of course, they've had pasteurized milk and GMO sweetened cereal for breakfast, which turns to sugar in your system, so they can't concentrate, they can't sit still.
Right.
No problem.
Yeah, right.
Ritalin or whatever else.
But I wonder, like, when you mention things like that, it's I think about how much of that is like a planned, intentional thing, and then how much of that is just not knowing and just kids really like sugar. It's really tasty. Look, my son loves to eat his Fruit Loops. Let's just give and it's I don't know if it's like, let's intentionally give them too much sugar, or like
in terms of the sugar. Well, I think that goes that'll take us to commerce, to the just because we're in a commercial world.
To just make the most money. Well,
the cheapest way possible, cheapest ingredients. It's all about profits.
Right.
And that's why, they don't want raw milk getting a foothold, because
I think someone just knocked on my door. So
okay,
I'll be right back. Yeah. That was a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
Yeah.
Invited them in to join.
Oh yeah, that would have been fun. We'd talk about the Bible for the rest of the time.
But back to the sugar thing and whatnot, I was just saying that's why raw milk has been demonized, because you give raw milk to kids with eczema and whatnot, and lo and behold, their eczema goes away. And
really,
so all of these sort of traditional foods that we have, I know a lot about this, I teach this, and I eat this way. All these traditional foods that we used to eat, no one eats that way anymore, because, they're more, I guess, expensive to produce, or they're made expensive to produce. And all the big factories have taken over every element of our food.
And just speaking of like viewing things in metaphor and all this, when you talk about, I think it's very clear to see these days that so many people are sick in some way, whether it's like anxiety disorders or things like eczema or all of these sort of things. And you can really look at it that like a clear sign that if you look at it from a big picture, our culture needs help. And like we need to change things in some way, because people are experiencing all of these ailments of different kinds. And it just seems, but I do want to focus on your idea of spells before we move on to. I really want to talk about that a bit. It's a very cool idea. Like you're talking like the media sort of putting a spell on people through what they're showing. And if you look at things like the news and how it's just like, be very afraid, be so afraid, everything's very scary, you should be wanting your government to protect you from everything. And that's kind of like a spell in terms of what you're using.
Of course. And spells are cast with words. That's where spelling a word comes from.
Right.
And in terms of poetry, many old spells that were cast, that were said they would rhyme. They would be sort of lyrical, have sort of a sing-song lyrical cadence to them. And then they would be spoken aloud, usually 3 times, which is an interesting number. That's a very high number of magic, and that's all over the place. And so even media, you think of the word medium, and a medium is, well, what I do at times. Someone who will bring through, a different intelligence, whatever. They'll act, or they'll act as a medium.
Right.
And so we have the media, which does that. And I'll tell you an interesting story. I was in a mushroomed state a few years ago, 4 years ago, or whatever, talking to a friend of mine. And I had just done I was in my office. No one was in the house that weekend. And I had the phone propped up on something on my altar, and I had just a candle lit, and we were talking on the phone. You know how your phone goes black after a while?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the beings, if you will, said, "That's a scrying machine." And I was like, oh my goodness. Scrying, do you know what scrying is? Scrying,
No.
if you're reading a crystal ball, that's a form of scrying, but they would mostly, it's where you're looking at a polished surface and you sort of shift states of consciousness. And again, those with the proclivity have the ability to see images there. And so it was often scrying was done with a polished black obsidian. And so it just gave me that like big aha, like, wait a minute, because what does our computer or television, our cell phone look like when that light switches off? It's black.
And looking into these things to see like future events?
Yes. Someone would do that. They would read that. Only what's happening with these is, because it is AI, they tell you, artificial intelligence. And so they are providing the images for us. They're providing all of that, all those programs for us. And think even of, by the way, with, childhood, if my daughters are 16 and 18 now, and we didn't have cell phones. It's so amazing what's happened in our lifetime, but we didn't have cell phones when they were little. If we did, there's no way I would let them have those. Hell no. But childhood is being absorbed into a screen now.
But you can also learn so much through these things as well.
There's the double-edged sword. And however, they're not stimulating their own imagination. It's not the same as when you read someone a story and they're listening to the story, but they in their mind are conjuring, to use a word, the imagery in their mind and, stimulating their imagination, or coming up with their own
I do see what you mean there, yeah, because it is a different thing. Watching something and taking in that information is totally different than being in here and thinking about it in your own visionary realm in your head or whatever it is.
And this is the thing, we are in a society where it's all externalized. It's all externalized, and everything is vying for our attention to pull us over there or pull us over there. And there's nothing encouraging us to take some time and go inward. When these people go to their doctor and their doctor says, "Oh, you've got this disease and whatnot," not the doctor doesn't say, "I want you to just take a little time, just sit with this, run it through yourself." There are other alternatives. Of course, they never say that. They slam, "Okay, we've got to start chemo right away. We need you in here next Tuesday." And the person's in an absolute panic.
Right.
And then cannot access the higher order thinking either. And so, that's a form of spell casting.
Yeah,
well,
I mean, when it comes to things like that, when we get into that idea, what's really powerful there is that they've actually done studies. Like, we know this for sure. It's a fact that the placebo effect is quite real. That if someone thinks they're going to be cured, they have like a measurable, like 20% chance or something higher than if someone doesn't think they're going to be cured. And if we know that's real, if we know that that's a real thing, the power of the mind is amazing. So if we don't actually help people with just stress, if we know stress can contribute to a ton of physical problems. It's huge. It's totally real. It's measurable. So that, knowing that, it allows me to make these other jumps to believing in some of this other stuff and some of these other practices and things.
Well, the mind is the wand. The mind is the wand. And Brew, my teacher, who was an MD, he started out as an MD and then he left that practice and became this amazing teacher for 30 years. But he would tell the best stories. And he told us a story of, there have been a lot of studies on people with multiple personalities. And there was one woman and she had two personalities. One was healthy. The other had a disease. And I don't remember what the disease was.
Oh,
But guess
yeah.
what? When she was the personality that had the disease, her entire body expressed that disease. When
Right.
she was the healthy personality, her entire body was healthy, like that.
Wow.
And
That's
plus,
amazing.
she
Yeah.
had 2 menstrual cycles each month, one body.
What?
Yeah, what exactly? Exactly.
Wow.
And so what does that tell you about this? And so if we could tap that without having to change our entire personality, and when you think about stress, stress comes from this, of course. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yes, our lifestyle is insane. It really is insane.
Yeah.
And so that's contributing, and it makes this just like nuts, right? But so the thought processes are this constant, oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? I got to get over there. It's constant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thinking in here. And the entire physical body responds. And the next thing you have, created an illness. Now, the flip side of that, of course, is again, if we could tame this dragon or these
Mm-hmm.
dragons of these thoughts that we have, if we could learn to do that, that takes a lot of practice. And boy, they keep us awfully busy in this modern society.
Yeah, yeah.
And they not only keep us busy, they mock that kind of thing. We are a slave culture. So we are really thought to believe, well, that's very indulgent.
Mm.
And like, what do you mean you're doing that?
Oh,
Don't you
yeah,
have work to
yeah.
do?
Who
Don't you have
has
somewhere to
time
be?
to do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And yet, that is the very thing we should be practicing, is working to tame these dragons called our thoughts. And so that was coming in big time for me after Scotland in particular.
Mm.
These kind of mentors, as they call themselves, saying, we're going to keep this very elementary, very rudimentary. So we want you to carefully consider the power of your words and the vibration that is created with those words and how they affect the area around you, the people around you, and also the forces of those thoughts, because our thoughts are actual forces. There's some kind of force there that enables us to have a thought.
Right.
It's so powerful. And I think, again, very telling that, as you were saying earlier, all this media is keeping people in fear, constant fear and stress.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is nonsense. A lot of this, whatever, all these events, I think the majority of them are just psyops, again,
Yeah.
to just keep us in that fear and keep us compliant.
Yeah.
And if it's not through the media, it's done with antidepressants and all these pharmaceuticals and whatnot. And which leads me to believe, well, this organism, body-mind organism, must be quite something. If the powers that be who don't want to relinquish that power, if they have gone to the extreme time and expense, God only knows, to keep us in this sort of down here kind of place, right? Rather than accessing these abilities that really, I think, are intrinsic. And there is a scientist up your way, I think he's in Alaska, actually, Dr. Nick Begich. And he gave a talk a number of years ago, and he was talking about how, the military in particular are very, very interested in what's going on here and how do we control it.
Right.
And that one of the things that they discovered in these studies they've been doing forever is that we do have the potential to fully awaken, to become fully self-realized. It's there. It's there. Well, that scared the shit out of them, because that means you can't be lied to, right? I mean, like when that thing goes off, and it's understood also, like even the story of Jesus, talk about metaphor. He was 33 when he died. He was known as Jesus, then he became the Christ, right? There's 33 vertebrae in the back. We have the coiled serpent at the base of the spine, the kundalini, as that slowly rises up the spine and then dies on the cross because it crosses the base of the skull and comes in here. What is this called, by the way? The temple. And you have the two pillars, the left and right side of the brain.
Right.
And you have within there the pineal gland. And interestingly, and I read this in a medical book, the pineal gland is found in the third ventricle within the brain. And it's like a little house. It's got 4 walls. And you go it's found sort of towards the back of that, which makes me think of like the way churches are set up in temples. You walk in and then the adytum, the Holy of Holies, or the altar, is usually, further towards the back.
Right. And that's an example of like this metaphorical type of thinking that one is sort of inclined to do, especially during these experiences with mushrooms and things like this, that type of, but then there is just that risk, or that risk of delusion, or that risk of like putting meaning in when there isn't necessarily meaning there, or making things fit into a certain box of these things. But I did want to mention, like my last podcast that I released was with a man in Vancouver who runs a float center where they have sensory deprivation tanks.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a really good discussion about similar things with just how the mind works and how we're stuck very physically. They can like trace it. I think it's the frontal cortex or frontal lobe. I'm not really big on the brain chemistry and stuff, but there's a part of our brain that just basically does all of the like, okay, I got to do this and then this, and I have to take this to this person, then I have to do this, and then all that's just sort of day to day, and we're all just stuck in that all the time, and we're just in that very surface level bullshit stuff going on. And what happens with psilocybin and with these flotation tanks is with the flotation tanks, they obviously cut out all your senses, so you don't feel anything, you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, and your brain just has all that resources to put into other places of thought, other types of consciousness that you have access to, but you just normally aren't able to get into. And when people do that, they're able to think in these way deeper ways and get into all this past stuff that just never enters their consciousness otherwise, because they're all so busy thinking in these other ways. And it seems like some of the studies on psilocybin now, they're doing some brain mapping and things to show that psilocybin opens up connections in the brain that normally aren't even happening. They're not normally communicating to each other. But under these influences, it's a very physical, measurable response that your brain activity changes quite a bit, and your consciousness as well, and how you're thinking, the thoughts that are entering your mind are different. It's just cool that it's actually quite measurable what's happening.
Yeah, and that's interesting you would talk about those flotation tanks, because I know there is a practice where you go into darkness and you're there for a period of days or weeks, and it's said to stimulate your own production of DMT.
Oh, yeah, right. I might have heard that as well. Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, and then, I just found in my research, because I think I'm going to do another book now beyond this poetry book. Before I talk about that, in my research, I read that the bards of old, the Celtic bards, they would go into these little chambers, and it was pitch black. And they would spend time in those chambers to receive poetic inspiration. And so doing something similar, I think causing their mind brain to do something similar that occurs when you work with a psychoactive substance.
And that's something that I think the person I interviewed might have brought this up as well, but I've heard it from other places too, that the pyramids in Egypt had these chambers that seemed to be meant for similar purposes, that were obviously they're at the heart of these pyramids, so they're completely black if there's no candlelight on or whatever. And it seems like there's some areas that were set up for these sort of vision quest type of scenarios with whatever things they were ingesting too, who knows, but yeah. They incorporated that as well. Maybe silent darkness, as McKenna would say. Yeah.
It has quite an effect on the brain. And think how few people would really feel comfortable doing that these days, because they're so caught up in that sort of chronic stimulation, constant stimulation.
Yeah. And then just talking about sort of the relationship with the self, or your higher self, or whatever it is, people often, it's kind of a scary thing. And I think deep down people kind of know, like that's why it's a little scary, this idea of maybe getting into this isolation tank where it's just you and your thoughts, or taking a psychedelic drug that seems to be this kind of truth serum type of thing that's going to bring that deeper self out of people. Because I think deep down a lot of people know they don't want to face a lot of this stuff that maybe they've been doing for years, or going in this direction of accumulating as much money as possible and all this. And it's a hard thing to face if you know deep down that it is the wrong way, or, that changes need to be made of some kind.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the infantilization again, also, of the entire public. I mean, there's just so many diversions for us and so many addictions to activate. And so yeah, that's why I also like the work of the shadow work. I think that's really important also, sort of it's really just going into your deep psyche, and the mushroom will do that, and it will often reveal to you those places that you are trying to avoid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or and that has been the case for me as well. And yet that is, I think, if you can go in there with humble heart, then you can be taught. And I would find often with my mushroom journeys toward the end would be more of that kind of thing, like pointing out, you didn't have to talk to so and so just quite that way. You could have couched it differently. Like, that
Right.
wasn't so nice. That kind of thing would come to me at different times. And that has been so instructive for me, because I feel like it has ultimately made me a better mother.
Mm.
It's made me a better friend, because it would make that so apparent, kind of show you, and not in this kind of way, but
Right.
just in, very sort of matter of fact.
Yeah. 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 Right. Just yeah. Just shedding the light on this stuff in a very such a clear way that it's just you can't deny anything in that state. You're just shown it, and that is what it is, and you have to accept it on whatever level it comes.
Yeah.
So I do want to just go back to like the spell idea again, because we talked about
Sure.
it as sort of the media having this sort of constant spell over people and just whatever. Yeah. But have you ever tried to practice or research the idea of intentionally casting a spell in some sense for whatever purpose, like personally?
Well, that brings us to curses as well.
Yeah.
And our people know that very well, the Irish. And
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of, I've heard a lot
oh
about
yeah,
Irish curses.
sure. And other cultures as well. I mean, every culture had that, curses and spell casting as well. And so back to, spell casting. Okay, so first of all, you have to understand human nature. And what I'm getting when I sort of view this whole sort of TV programming, all this media stuff, it's like, all right, well, these guys have got quite a handle on human nature, and certainly in the ad world they do, because they
Right.
know exactly, thanks to
Yeah.
Freud and then his nephew Bernays, who really put that into play in terms of the media, and where you stimulate people's base desires, and it's
Totally.
done
Yeah.
through imagery and certain keywords. And so that is a kind of spell casting, and people don't even realize it.
Right.
And then they are under a spell. All of a sudden they want the car. They don't realize that that beautiful woman there
Yeah.
bypasses the conscious mind, goes right into the psyche.
Yeah.
It's
No,
like
it
they
is
associate
amazing.
the
They're
with the girl.
so good at that. They're so good at that now. It's amazing. They know exactly how to hold people's attention and to make them think about certain things.
Yeah, that goes back to Edward Bernays. I gave a talk when I spoke at Kai Wingo's conference. I gave a talk. It's on YouTube on that very thing, where I talked about how this sort of media has steadily over time, just sort of take, essentially it's mind control. I mean, for all intents and purposes, or social engineering, or conditioning, however you want to call it. There's so many people, and they're just trying to direct the masses accordingly. And Freud also put the fear of God in a lot of these sort of big tyrant billionaire guys, talking about how essentially man can't control his baser drives. So we better figure this out and control those drives for him. And so, now, oh my God, here we are.
Yeah.
And so spells are cast that way. Now, curses also are, directed, and they usually, they come out in words, and they're usually accompanied, especially if it's curse, with a lot of emotion. And all of that is energy. Everything is energy.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a great quote, I think it's Mark Twain: worry is a prayer for it to happen. When I heard that, I was like, oh shit, okay, I better stop worrying, because what are you doing? You're thinking about it all the time.
You're putting energy into something.
Yeah, it's stimulating a feeling, which is and more energy. And then you're visualizing, oh God, this could happen, right? And next thing you know,
Right.
often it happens. And so curses usually happen when someone is pretty riled up, a lot of energy, and then it comes out, and those words are vibrations. It's usually directed at someone, sadly, often a child. You'll never, whatever they say, you'll never amount to whatever. And then lo and behold, right? Or even, I hear this all the time from different clients, right? Oh, no, I never sing. No, when I was in second grade, I sang, and my teacher made a comment that was not so, a cutting comment. And so I haven't sung since then. That's casting a spell.
I see. So you're right. So with the definition of, so there's it'd be hard to remember to ask all these different questions I have in my head here, but there's a few things I wanted to touch on. Like, so it sounds like you're saying, like, how you describe how you put casting of spells, like, just you can possibly direct enough energy into something happening just by your intention, by your belief, and by speaking it outwardly, and just having enough energy to put in a direction that it's possible that could influence something. Even now,
Yes.
are you saying it would be possible, say as an example, say you have two scenarios. One is the person you hate is right next to you in the room, and it seems obvious if you said something to them curse like, and you had a lot of intention behind it, and that could affect that person because they're right there and they hear what you say and they hear all the energy behind it. But are you saying then that it's possible that if that person was on the other side of the earth, you could do the same thing and have a similar effect?
I think it could, but it's not that cut and dry. And it's, of course, the naysayers are going, oh, yeah, no way, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
but this is something, we have to remember something, first of all, when it comes to that level of magic. First of all, it's an understanding of the natural forces around us and how to manipulate them, which is why, it's neutral force. So it depends on who's doing the manipulating. But this is a practice. And so way back in the day, the Druids, for instance, were known for their very high magic skills, and other certain shamanic folk as well. But this they'd been doing since they were a child, training for this, right? And specific focus. In other words, this isn't, you don't just sort of, oh yeah, figure it out. I just watched a video the other day on a Taoist master, and he is a martial artist, and he had all these different students try to come at him as if they were going to kill him, just with everything they had. And he could command the chi, the energy around him, to the point that he created like a force field. And it was amazing to watch this video, and they could only get so fast and then so far. And then,
but I don't know. So I've seen videos like that, and I've also seen ones that, like, those same type of masters will have this belief with their students, and their students will believe it in such a way that it's almost like the placebo effect again, that they believe they can't touch him. So that happens. But I've also seen videos where people like that end up going into a ring with someone who doesn't believe them at all, and who just punches them in the face. And that's one of those things that I think is hard to prove for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to see an example of that.
Yeah.
I would love to see an example.
I'd love to definitely feel that. I'd like to be one of the people to go try to attack someone like that and see if there is any, you'd have to experience it firsthand to know, I think. I guess.
Yeah, I would say also, because again, we have such a superficial understanding, including myself. We have not been trained in the way that maybe we would have if our cultures had not been taken over and corrupted and erased, basically, right? We would have a level of training and a depth of understanding that we simply don't have today. Very few people have it. And those who do keep it pretty on the down low.
Yeah.
And for good reason, right? So it's not impossible. In fact, it is very possible.
Right. So
I know this more and more.
You're saying it's possible, but it's not some simple thing where you just read out of a book and you do some little
if that were the case, don't you think everyone would be able to do this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you think, especially in this information age, that would get around real fast?
Yeah.
No, this stuff this requires training, just like a martial art. requires training and
Right.
focus. Again, back to the infantilized way. We think, oh, well, just take a pill or just take that workshop and I'm good to go.
Right. Yeah.
Or I get my little, plaque. And no, absolutely not. No, this is a lot of practice and dedication. And people are, for the most part, too lazy and too impatient to do that for, that level of or just too darn busy.
Right.
We've got both parents working, we've got kids, and, it's people are just, very, very, very busy and then very, very diverted. Everything they can think of,
Right.
for us.
Yeah. I mean, I could I couldn't define what it is that I believe when it comes to this type of stuff, but I do just believe enough that I feel like a lot more is possible with our whatever abilities we have or don't have access to at the moment. It seems there is something else we could tap into. It seems quite clear.
I look at it also, Carl, in terms of what the military's into. I'm always interested, right? And just the very fact alone that I actually spoke with someone who's worked with ex-CIA, oh my God, she said, you don't even want to know the stuff these guys are into, and it's all paranormal.
Right, that they're even looking into that at all should tell you at least something. Yeah.
Should tell you something.
Yeah.
And so we, the muggles, are not given that, truly, right? I mean, we're not given that information. But the way I look at that also is, well, geez, if they give us this technology, like God, they give us these computers and these iPhones and whatnot, right? What are they squirreling away?
Right. Yeah.
What are they squirreling away? So there's a couple sayings that have been haunting me for years. And one of them is, nothing is as it seems. And another one is, truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, I definitely I feel like I live by those quite a bit in my life, but I see that is true a lot of the time. Yeah, often you can't predict what's actually going on or what actually is going to happen because it is so unimaginable. Or think like something like, if 10 years ago people told you Trump was the president of the US, it would be, I mean, for whatever whether you like Trump or not, it would be a hard concept to believe. Like, really? He had like a reality show at the time, or he was. It's just such a crazy thought that we're at this point, this place where this is what's happening. We have, yeah. I mean, and maybe you could believe it. He was a businessman. He was very successful. But for a lot of people, it's just like, at least in Canada, as we're up here just kind of like observers. It feels like, but I have a lot of discussions where people are just like, man, it's like it just feels like I'm in a simulation or something. Like it feels goofy.
Yeah. Although, I don't get caught up in any of that because anyway, it's all about divide and rule, which goes back to Rome and beyond. And look at how they've used the wand of the media to do just that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do try to distance myself from politics too, and I'm definitely not one to delve in too deep with that stuff.
But it's on every level. They are doing their level best to keep us as polarized as possible, whether it's black, white, or male, female, all this feminist stuff, and whatever it is to keep us like this, which is a Hegelian dialectic. So you just always have just two sides battling constantly, and then meanwhile those guys who do have the power, they're over here doing their thing. They let this silly slaves,
it doesn't matter who wins.
Just keep us fighting.
Focus on the differences, right? I really do like to just talk about the idea that as beings on the earth, we have so much more in common with everyone than we do different. It's like, but we just focus so much on what's different, which is like 1%.
But that's the media focuses on that. Do you see? It's like that spell they're casting.
Yeah,
but on every level.
And then, but I always go back and think, because I wonder about this with drugs. Say if I talk about it in instead talking about how drugs are illegal, some of these things like mushrooms and marijuana remain illegal, and how it's so preposterous. There's so much evidence that should say that these things should be legal, yet they're not. And then, so I ask people this question a lot: is do you think that's because the people making these laws are just ignorant and they've been sort of fed all this propaganda about how drugs are bad and just say no and all this stuff, and that they just believe that? Or do you think at some top level there are people who know the power of these things and who are intentionally keeping them illegal because they know that they have a power to change the situation.
I think there's truth in all of those possibilities. I do see also when you make things illegal, now you've created a whole new commercial enterprise. Okay?
Yeah.
Because so much money is made on arresting these guys for this and jailing them.
Right.
Jails are privatized. They're big business.
Yeah.
Big business.
And now that those are so big and successful business wise, it's really hard to go back the other way because they don't want that to happen. They don't want to lose all their business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you're also, I thought you were going to say that you're also creating a very powerful market for people who choose to sell all these drugs illegally. Now they have all this power as well, whatever criminal gangs or whatever it is. Yeah, you're creating power in that area too.
Yeah, but I think it all contributes. And actually, I think ultimately the powers that be want people drugged, because think of all the surveillance that we have. I mean, it's everywhere, and yet people can still go and find street drugs like heroin and cocaine. I mean, they can figure it out and they can find it, and those guys do just fine business-wise. Thank you very much. Don't tell me that they cannot figure out who these guys are and catch them and, put that stuff out of circulation. I'm not buying that for 1 minute. And so
I don't know.
I think,
it might be harder than it seems because I feel like because there's so much money, which in our culture is power. There's so much power to be gained by selling this stuff that if you, like I spoke with a man recently who was an undercover cop in England for like 14 years. And he was specifically trying to bust drug gangs. And he said that, one of the biggest busts he ever made was like a 60-person large drug gang that was selling heroin, and they took him out. And then they had intel that within a couple of hours, another group just moved in and started selling in that same neighborhood.
Yeah.
But I mean, what I think could be true in the sense of what you're saying there is like maybe at the higher level, like whoever's like importing mass amounts of cocaine into these countries and distributing it to these lower level gangs and things. I feel like there's a good chance that's being in some way either aided or just influenced by some powerful people.
I believe it is. The CIA is one of the biggest drug dealers there is. I mean, again, this is commerce, right? And so you have your myths in everything. And some things are more covert, and other things the muggles can know about. I mean, I'm sorry to sound so cynical, but I really do. I can see it with crystal clarity.
Yeah.
And
I remember stories coming out. They had like pictures and things of like U.S. soldiers guarding poppy fields in Afghanistan and things like that. And I was like, okay, all right then. Yeah.
It's big business all around, whether it's on the down low, or black market or whatever, or not. But I also think that there is definitely an effort to keep us medicated or drugged or whatever it is, because
maybe that's
a medicated populace is easier to control. And actually, you should look up the definition, speaking of words and speaking of populace, in Webster's 1828 dictionary. And that'll give you a clue as to, I think, how the general folk are regarded. So one of the meanings of populace is the vulgar. Vulgar.
The sheep.
Yeah. And so I do think, there is an opportunity for us, and I think the mushroom can present that if used in a way where we can elevate ourselves out of this sort of infantilized state and come to a place of wisdom, a place of personal responsibility, sovereignty, even, just something people have lost entirely, I think. I think the mushroom has the potential to assist us there. I think it's very important, though, also that you have a good teacher or, practitioner for
Right.
that as well. I mean, I always, when I hit 40 and I started really delving into this, I'm so grateful because I was gifted with such fine teachers, such good teachers,
Mm.
who are very wise, and they taught me a lot, and it was a very kind of mature level of teaching, and that, a lot of shadow work,
Mm.
and so that helped me a great deal, and it's made me, a good practitioner, teacher.
And so do you think it will be, say, mushrooms specifically that could come into our culture on a larger scale? Say they were legalized in years to come, and that people would have access, hopefully through some kind of, you know, guided or informed way that they could use these things in a good way, and that would be the key for making these changes.
I would hope so, but at this point, I really honestly don't know, because I feel like, if you take a look at the culture, it is sunk so low. I mean, it really is very vulgar in a lot of ways. It's so base in a lot of ways, that in order for that to happen, you would need really good practitioners, and of course, the state wants to handle that, right? Because it would be the state
Mm.
legalizing it, and I'm, for the most part, not in agreement in how they handle that, because I don't think they do it in a very humane way at all. And so I talk a lot about that, about the medicine woman, or a good medicine man as well. I've talked to a
Mm.
couple of different guys actually who wanted to go into work as like a mushroom shaman,
Right.
and
Yeah.
really good talk. And I said, all right, listen, these guys are getting a bad rap because it's really intoxicating, when lovely young women come to you,
Oh yeah.
to work with you. It's really, really hard.
Sure. Yeah. People are really vulnerable, and if you're in that position, you have a lot of power.
Yep. Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. So I've just said to both these guys, look, we need good guy shamans, good practitioners, and that we do. We do. I mean, I am just a big fan of the evolved masculine,
Mm.
and so, anyway, we talked about that part a lot. And so that would be very important. In other words, if the mushrooms were, if we could do this and not have to worry, we could advertise, shall we say,
Right. Right.
that you have people of integrity and maturity, be they men or women,
Right.
who would be up to the task, who would be able to provide a very safe set and setting for that person, and also be able to provide the integration, to help them integrate beyond
Right.
that. So that's the most important piece.
Right. If that was available in that way, because it's not as simple as just taking the mushroom.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. No. And when I have worked with people, because I'll just openly say, perhaps I have, um, because look, there's groups, there's people running groups.
Hmm.
I mean, I've talked to people all the time. There was 20 some odd people, 15 people,
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah.
They were given whatever brownie. Sometimes it's like part ayahuasca, part mushroom. A lot of times they have
Mm.
no idea the dose they're taking. They have no idea. They're just given
Right.
it in a brownie or whatever. And, some people, this is amazing. But for
Hmm.
others, not so great, and it's too many people and whatnot.
Yeah. I agree. I think so. When I did ayahuasca that one time in Peru, yeah, it was a large group. Too many people.
Yeah.
For me, it was like 25 people. I mean, it's a very large group. Um, and for lots of reasons, just logistically, it's just a lot of people to have around. And if you're doing certain things in ceremony, which they were, where they were doing individual blessings for people and things like that, well, then as someone who's just sitting there, I'm waiting for an hour while they're blessing all these other people. And just something like that is just, it, yeah. I mean, I do feel like if I was going to work with people in some capacity, whatever that would be with mushrooms, it would be in very small scale, either one-on-one, maybe 3, maybe 4 people at the most, I would imagine.
Yeah, I will say the mushroom said to me once, "Dear," because I did it a couple times with a small group. It didn't work out. And the mushroom said, "Dear, you are a midwife, and a midwife works with but one person."
Right.
And so that one-on-one, and also, when I talk to people, there are people who I speak with because I am a therapist as well, and so often people who do want to do that, it's the first time they've ever done anything like that. And
Yeah.
probably the last time. So to go to like a group,
Yeah.
it's not going to necessarily work for them.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to that. Like, there's one just having having a lot of attention. If it's a situation like that, if it's your first time and you're very nervous, probably
Oh, yeah.
you want someone who's going to be there with you at all times, who you can trust,
Yep.
who is going to talk with you a lot before and after. But also, if you just socially, if you have 4 other people, you then have to be. You're kind of or at least for me, I would be inevitably. I'm a different person socially than I am by myself, say. So if there's 4 other people, especially if they're strangers too, now I have to act in these social ways to be around this group. It's a different dynamic, I guess, as I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
being with a number of people.
Yeah. And the group has its place. And then there is the one-on-one piece, which I'm just personally a big fan of.
And what about other substances other than mushrooms? What's your opinion on things, whether it's ayahuasca, peyote, and all of these things?
I think, whatever you're drawn to. The ayahuasca, I think, is a mess.
Become too popular.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's this beautiful medicine. It's so powerful. And there's just a lot going on there. I just kind of shake my head. I'm just glad I chose the mushroom, put it that way. That said, I have experienced it. And before I experienced it, we're going to do it with this male shaman who helped himself to my friend. Sexually, and then I found a whole blog dedicated to him. So I remember saying, "Where are the women ayahuasqueras?" And a month later, I get wind of these 2 beautiful women who had studied with a fellow in Peru, and these women were so full of integrity, and they held an all women's ayahuasca circle, and they did it with such grace. And so I did that, but it came to me like, this is not your medicine. That was before the mushroom. And then the mushroom was calling me. Peyote.
Oh, that was before you had tried mushrooms?
Yeah. Oh. I'd heard about the ayahuasca. I was looking into it. And then if my girlfriend had done it, my friend I knew, and then said, "Oh yes, the shaman was so beautiful. Like, she's so naive." He got into the sleeping bag with me afterwards. It was so nice, and he just held me, and he had my hands, whatever. And I was like, I don't think
that can't be right.
I don't think that's part of the ceremony. It just doesn't ring true, And then I looked him up. I was like, whoa, all these women.
I've heard similar stories from a number of people.
Oh my God, yeah. So we've got to. I think also there's a lesson there for all of us in personal responsibility as well. We have to be very, very careful who we work with, whether it's legal or not.
Right.
I mean, look, you choose your doctor carefully, hopefully. I don't go to doctors, but, whoever your practitioner is, you must choose this person carefully as well. Peyote, I sat in circle with a Native American church. I had a lovely woman sponsor me. And this particular ceremony happened to be all women. It's interesting that these initiations have been all women, but they sent out an invitation, and there's a theme or whatever, and the prayer was for the power for women to go out into the world and heal. And 55 women showed up, and it was a huge teepee on this beautiful property.
Wow.
And it was so beautiful, and it was traditional ceremony, and there was a woman keeping the fire in the center of the teepee, and there was the woman who was the water carrier, and they passed this all around, and it was all night ceremony, which is not easy to do. And it was beautiful, and I really felt like when that was done, I left there a better woman.
Can
And,
you?
that's how I feel about my work with the mushroom. I feel like I'm a better woman today than I was,
Yeah.
when I first started with the medicine.
No, absolutely. I feel like that as well. And another person I had spoke to recently, who the podcast is not released yet, but he one thing he said to me that I liked. He said, "You're always every time you use something like mushrooms, you're a completely different person after that. From that point forward, you are now changed. Like it changes you at some level. That yeah, and I
Yes.
felt that it stuck with me. Things that I've learned, things I do feel like I've changed a lot through my use of mushrooms for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
When the mushrooms call me, once in a while now, they say, it's time to die again, dear.
right. It is kind of like that, yeah. And I was going to ask you if you could compare the experience with the peyote to mushrooms, because I've never used peyote. I've heard from a couple of people, and of course it's going to be different if you're in a ceremony with 50 people. That in itself makes things different. But how does the experience of peyote compare to mushrooms?
Well, I'll just say it was not. When I work with a mushroom, usually I'll see those gorgeous shimmering images first.
Right. Yeah.
Just this gorgeous spectacle. And that'll last for a certain amount of time. And then it goes away. And then it's like just being on this deep journey and everything is felt. And that's when I have these conversations and whatnot.
Mm.
And so with peyote, I did not, have any of those shimmering, nothing like that. My friend leaned in and said, just focus on the fire and grandfather peyote will speak with you through the fire. And that's precisely what happened. There was a telepathic conversation that was going on.
Right.
And I was very much in need of that ceremony because I had to let go of someone. And and that really did it for me and broke that spell, if you will. And a lot of people, it is said, will go to those peyote ceremonies and they'll go in as an alcoholic and they'll leave, and that has been lifted. And so, and I really think realistically, I was in a way sort of addicted to this person. It was this an old wound and all of that, right? And so that was healed that night. And so yeah, the fire peyote was speaking to me telepathically. And then towards the end, earlier that night at one point, my medicine is the owl, by the way. It's an owl behind me there. But these two owls like flew right over the teepee and they were calling to each other. It was so loud and profound.
Oh, cool.
And towards the end, maybe, I don't know, in the wee hours of the morning, I looked up at one point and I had an owl wing with me. And it was the only sort of image I saw. Behind every woman was the outline in blue of some kind of bird, huge bird. It was the most, I will never forget it as long as I live. And it was as if like I was able to see each woman's ally. And there were eagles, there were owls, it was extraordinary. And then at one point I was like, oh, where's my wing? I couldn't find it. And then I found it. It was behind my back, as if to say, yes, dear, yours is behind you as well. Wow. So it was extraordinary. And there were a lot of Native American people there. And it really opened my heart in a big way. It was a very special ceremony. I highly recommend it if you're lucky enough to find a Native group that will let you come in. Not all, of course, do.
Right. So I want to ask what you think is happening or what we're connecting to when we're using these things. And maybe, a thought I just had is, because there are so many now. I've learned about lots of other psychedelic substances that are out there. There's quite a lot of different things, from LSD to mescaline to whatever. There's lots, and a lot of them have very similar effects on our perception and things. And without taking away from this idea that maybe we are connecting to something greater, and it could be a spiritual realm or something like this. But perhaps what these drugs are doing is just basically allowing, changing our brains in some way, our receivers, our antennas, to link up with these areas. And that all these drugs maybe in certain ways just do a very similar thing, and that they have little slight differences, but really they're just affecting our brain or whatever, our minds, to open up to these experiences. And it's not that the substances themselves are doing this, but they're just allowing us to connect to that. And so I want to ask you what you think the case is. What are we connecting to with all of these things?
That's very interesting that you would say that. When I started working with a mushroom, what I realized was this is a portal.
Mm.
And so these substances, I see them as portals. I prefer what comes from Mama Nature. I don't want what comes from a laboratory. I know there's
Right.
people who love LSD. I have no interest. I
Yeah.
want a natural plus what comes from nature, because everything that comes from nature is an intelligence. There are plant intelligences of all kinds, and trees and whatnot, and animals and birds and insects. So you have ingested a mushroom, or you have ingested the Banisteriopsis. Is that the ayahuasca?
Yeah.
So you've ingested a master intelligence, an ancient intelligence, older than we are. And so, yes, I think it is opening up parts of the mind so that we can have an experience, a conversation, if you will. I also know through my work with a mushroom that the Holy Grail, if you will, again, all these sort of metaphorical stories are talking about it's in here. That it's in here. In other words, we're the microcosm of the macrocosm. So the macrocosm being the universe and beyond. It keeps going
Right.
infinitely. And then
It
we
seems
know
like
it also goes inward into atoms and electrons, and then you get into
quarks.
quarks and all of that. They keep going. They
Right.
keep going. So in other words, the universe is, and of course the alchemical maxim, as within, so without, as
Right.
above, so below. And so we are walking universes in and of ourselves, right? And so you take a substance and it will open those doors within so that you have that access. And
Right.
and yes, if you meditate enough or whatever, you can access something like that, I'm sure, of course. And also the very fact that, like, back to those isolation tanks, and the fact that people would do that, and it would stimulate our own DMT.
Right.
So it is in here, and those substances open that for that short duration that we are, under that influence. And you've invited in an intelligence. I mean, I think anyone who's done ayahuasca would agree. Yep. I mean, she's got a distinct personality. And then, of course, there are other personalities or intelligences, shall we say,
Right.
that will enter as well. So yes, you are opening yourself up to a master intelligence. And I think this also is a master intelligence, but you need to learn how to use it, how to work with it. And again, the ancients were, and I'm sure perhaps very small groups that we won't know about today, they would train for this. So you weren't going in, like a 14-year-old or in my case, a 48-year-old, who didn't have any. I mean, we went with our just good graces and our integrity, and we did what we did. And, we fared well for it. But can you imagine being trained and studying with these adepts?
Right. Yeah. How different that could be. Yeah.
Oh my God, initiated into the mystery, so that by the time you do take that sacrament, you are ready. You're ready.
Right. Yeah.
And so then you're not going to get deluded. Not going to think you're Jesus or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to, be in a very different place. And so we are doing the best with what we have here.
Yeah. Kind of like learning as we go sort of thing with this stuff. But
yes, and hopefully we've got a good base within ourselves.
Yeah. So maybe I can ask you, like, I feel like we could wrap up soon here, but
Sure.
maybe to ask how you use them, because I'm sure that the way you've used mushrooms has evolved over time. It sounds like you've worked with many different people who probably have slightly different ceremony or different ways of using and working with mushrooms. But if you're going to sit down for a mushroom ceremony or a session, maybe in a couple of weeks, what sort of things would you prepare? What would you bring with you? Where would you do it? Like, what's your way of doing it these days?
Okay, I have sort of two different ways. When the weather's nice, I have a little tent and it's got a screened top. And so, because I far prefer to be outside. And so I live in this wonderful horse farm. It's so beautiful. And so it's not my farm, I rent. But in any
Okay.
case, I luckily have this place. And so I'm looking out my window at these beautiful, massive cedars. And so I will go to the base of the cedar tree there.
Hmm.
And I do it at night. And you know, so I take a sage or a copal. I will skip dinner.
Hmm.
And so I've gotten, you know, a good 6, maybe 7 hours, you know, where I have not eaten anything.
Right.
And then so I set up my tent, get it all comfortable. And
Hmm.
then I have my mushrooms, and I go by sort of what comes in me, you know, to 3.3 and you will see, or, you know, whatever it tells me,
Hmm.
you
As
know,
far as
so I'll go
dose.
by that in an inner directive, shall we say. And then I will, you know, light the sage or copal. I will walk counterclockwise, by the way. We're always think to walk clockwise to open something.
Hmm.
That's not true. When you open up a bottle,
Mm-hmm.
a screw top, which way does that turn? It turns counterclockwise to open. So I walk counterclockwise 3 times around the area where I will be working.
So
And
why do those steps? Why counterclockwise and why 3 times? What do you feel that brings to the?
counterclockwise is opening a doorway, if you will, energetically. And then 3 is the highest number in magic. And interestingly, by the way, law and magic were often learned together. And in law, they are obsessed with the number 3.
Hmm.
So in any case, so 3, and also once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern.
Oh yeah, okay.
And so it's sort of like, you know, I'm not walking around here by accident as I'm talking to the spirits and creating this boundary. And no, this isn't a coincidence. No, this is
Right.
I am serious here. This is,
Yeah.
you know, I'm
You
creating.
could call that like setting an intention.
Yes, we're casting a circle. And you know, and I'm not a Wiccan or any of that. This is just
Right.
what I do.
Right.
So I'm creating this boundary, and then I will, you know, sage myself, sage the medicine, any elements that I'm bringing in. I always have a wing in there with me, and I'll just sit outside for a bit and just, you know, just be with myself or someone I'm with. And then when I feel the medicine kicking in, I'll go in and lie down, and then I just let myself fall into the earth, sink into the earth. I love that feeling. And then what comes. If I do it indoors, like right now, and it's 26 degrees outside, then I will, it's nice to have a fire going. If I do that, I will have a friend with me, you know, a very, very close dear friend,
Right.
you know, who can sort of watch the fire.
Oh,
And then
okay.
I will lie down, but at some point I sit up and I just sort of wrap a blanket around me. And then it feels like it could be 3,000 years ago, you know, it could be any time, you know, and then I speak. And so
that's
what I do.
That's interesting. You speak, you feel like in some way you seem to channel something vocally.
Oh God,
when
yeah. Oh, they take over.
I do that. I do that a lot as well. I find I always get vocal. Yeah.
Yeah. So bring a recorder, Carl. Truly though, because
Maybe
you
I'll have to
never
do a
know what
podcast.
insights, yeah, or something just really poetically beautiful will come through you, and that is not nothing. That is important to just have a record of that, and it could also, it's like you brought yourself into that state, and it's going to gift you something. And often we'll have, it's, you know, it takes us to so many places we can't even remember or keep track,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So,
true. Yeah.
you know, it's really nice if you have your wits about you.
Right. But so it sounds like your practice is fairly simple. You fast
Yeah.
a little bit, like don't eat right before.
Yeah.
And just be calm, be intentional with what you're doing, and
Yeah, I call in my ancestors, you know, I call in the nature spirits, and I just say tricksters and troublemakers.
right. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe we can also, before we go, if talk about your book again and where and when that's available, and where people can get it.
Okay, so it is called Poetic Whispers from the Green Realms, and it is mystical poetry, and some of it has been expressed through a be-mushroomed state, and most of it has come as a result of that. And it will be on my website, which is shonaghome.com. I'm selling it as an ebook, and I yesterday just recorded an audio version, and so the audio version will be
nice.
ready in early January, and so that will be up on my website, and I will have a print version of it as well. But for sure, the ebook will be available in the audio book.
Okay.
So that's coming together now, and I could, if you want. Shall I read a poem?
Sure, we could end with that. Yeah, I think that's a good way to end it. And if people want to contact you as well, obviously, if they go to your website, there's some kind of contact information there if they wanted to reach out to you.
Yes, of course. Yes. My email is shonagh.home@comcast.net. My website is shonaghome.com, and it's spelled the Gaelic spelling, SHONAGHHOME.com. And I make myself as accessible as I can be. Between clients, I do most of my sessions via Skype of therapy sessions with people, and then I do 4-day retreats one-on-one, which are amazing, very, very transformative. That is all focused on that one person, and they stay in my home, and I cook their food, and I teach them, and we do ceremony. Is very, very, very in depth. So that's cool. I've been doing that a lot this year, and people usually fly in for that.
Oh, wow.
So that information is on my site. So it's real. This is my work, is the medicine work. Medicine work.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I will have links to your website as well in the description to this podcast. If anyone's listening, they can go down there and click away.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So, I'll read this poem. Is this too long? It's like 5 minutes long. Is that going to be too long?
It's okay. I think it's fine. Well,
okay.
You can end it with that. Yeah, it's great.
Okay. All right. This poem came through when I came back from Scotland. So no, I was not on the mushrooms when this came through. And this is what is coming through as a result of the mushrooms. And I think that's an important distinction to make also, because we get to a point where it's almost like the teacher says, all right, you're ready. You're ready to go on your own now. Off you go and take all of these wands you've acquired and use them wisely. And so this wisdom that has come through the mushroom, some of it's opened a part of me so that I have access to that. And so it's very special. And so this is called Stone Circle Whispers. I'm going to have a glass of water before I start this.
Yeah.
The great stones that make circles round, strategically placed upon the ground. Beneath the ground, the circuitry of Earth's magnetics you can't see. Then there is the geometry within the stones, again unseen. The math creates a frequency, a vortex that will help you see. A layering of energies found too in sacred groves of trees. The stones, like trees, are quite alive, programmed by wise folk who did strive to create earthly libraries for those seeking the mysteries. And in these circles are vibrations that are felt within your nation, designed to raise your frequency and open your third eye to see. A kind of prehistoric phone, so that you'll know you're not alone, for these designs will blow the mind. The architects of these great finds gained access to colleges in the stars, from which they were given special powers. These architects knew someday the hour of ignorance would thoroughly scour the earth, whose good folk would be slaves, subject to false leaders depraved. Long past unwritten history, initiates of the mystery could see far flung of what's to come, the voices of the cycles sung. And so, preparing for the fall, great stones were placed in ways that call, inviting folk to stand within a circle round where they'd begin to understand technologies designed to open eyes to see. These great stones hold the energy that long was placed by wise ones, we, the shining ones you call the she. The knowledge here will set you free. Allow us to take up your time with this very simple rhyme. We are an electric current flowing throughout time and space. When you activate in circles, you can take us any place. For those great circles were designed to activate us in your mind. Initiates stood in circle center, calling in the ancient mentors. If you've prepared with heart, mind ready, if you stand there tall and steady, if you're humble and receptive, we can give you your directive. You can tap your ancient lifetimes. We provide a kind of lifeline here for folk at any time, a pilgrimage to realign and speak with ancestors divine. The great stones may look old and battered. We will say it doesn't matter. Set in stone we once did cast. These places hold the knowledge vast. To those who come with right intention, we'll apprise them of inventions. They will work within their minds and bring them forth at certain times. And we think you would all agree that at this time in history, the secret knowledge these stones hold must be made active by the bold, who come to us from all directions, standing in these bold erections, called to visit wise ones tall, and break the spell that they are small. Many of you have come before, initiates old knew what's in store, as earth now stands before the door. A perilous time that you are in, how great the ignorance and the sin, as shameless leaders create spin that tricks the masses, sucks them in. You, good-hearted ones who weep, for all the folk who are asleep, you are a living bridge of grace. We look with pride upon your face. Find a circle, sacred place, that when you see it makes heart race. Worry not if you can't get there. We are here to make you aware. The metaphor of circles divine concerns the power of your mind, whose faculties were overtaken by outside interests, those forsaken ones who think they run this place. Well, we are here to change the pace. Now let's get back to your great minds that hold a hidden wand divine. The time is now to learn to use this wand within that they've abused. Your thinking habits must be changed, your neural networks rearranged. It's time to call the knowledge back and access secrets old. This is a task that you can hack. Rise to the moment bold. In the center of your chest, there sits a cauldron hot. Technology once placed in you which you have not been taught quite how to use effectively and even, we'd say, magically, combined with mind that has been cleared, and then effectively it's steered. The correct weaving of these tools creates a kind of inner battery. In this way, you're no longer fools or prey to the false flattery of what the constructs of your day persuade you all to be. Instead, you'll find your own design that sets your good soul free. This wondrous treasure you contain turns on your DNA, and in a kind of fast forward, your ignorance you'll slay. The body vessel that you're in is really like a ship. It has for long been programmed one way. We're about to flip that program on its head and activate the codes within. But you must be on board for this in order that you win. The prize of gold, the knowledge old, of which you will remember, is found within that great cauldron, beneath which burns the embers, that cast the light you hold within, running that great ship you steer. But that light's become quite dim. Your enemy is fear. We seek to cast a spell here now through this delivered rhyme. We say to those who've waited long that you are in the time of cosmic forces opening, and shining ones with their great wings will call you from your slumbering to clear your mind of misperceptions. We will point in the direction you must look for the inception, bringing you a point of view that you will recognize as true. The cauldron stoked by your heart's light, magician's pyre you must ignite. Feel in your heart center palpably the presence of something you cannot see, but rather feel it presently and magnify it expertly. Be aware of this cauldron throughout the day that provides the medium for the fae to undermine the spells of deception. We offer you a vast injection, enabling you to feel the might of the beauty you hold, your true birthright. Combine the feel of cauldron and heart with the power of mind that helps you start creating in ways that summon light, casting out darkness from this night. For in your mind there lies the grail, whose powers it is time to hail. Let go the stories you've outgrown that keep you chained to a false home. Whatever you have thought to date, it's time for you to clear the slate and still yourself to feel the beat, stoked by that magic cauldron's heat. Create a vision in your mind. Call back to you ancestors kind who'll help you fuel that ship you're in, who'll give you knowledge to begin to steer yourselves to water calm, where you will become the healing balm that soothes the troubled among your folk, and by example you will stoke their fire within so they can see that within them lives the mystery. This place within will set you free. It is within our eyes you'll see. The veils are parting wide now, dears. We're in the time prophesied by seers, when communication will exceed what imagination can conceive, and you will know yourselves again. Earth's people will once more be sane. And so know this to be your truth. Seek out our wisdom like a sleuth. We're found within that cauldron bright. We're here to help you end this night.
Wow, that was amazing. It was really great hearing you read that. I'm glad you read it. I feel like I'm in a bit of a trance now. Yeah, thanks a lot, Shonagh. Thanks for reading that.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you for everything. I so enjoyed talking with you, a fellow Canadian and mushroom kindred.